Thank you indeed, Dora. I like the way you put that. Why do we care? The word spirituality, I can tell you from just going down this path of the research, the word spirituality for some, when I say the word, I get a lot of caution. You know, be careful how you go there. With others, it's great, you know, you're doing something on spirituality. For the most, it would be spirituality. Oh, okay, and move on to the next topic, you know? So I think the word spirituality gives people different levels of comfort, and there's more discomfort with it than there is comfort with it. So for me, this is a journey of courage, if you like. So what does the word spirituality actually mean? And the dictionary here has it as relating to, consisting of, or affecting the spirit. So what is the spirit defined as? And this is where we get into a lot of trouble, because there are so many descriptors for spirit. You have an animating or vital principle, the giving of life, if you like, to a physical organism. And then there's a range of others, ranging from Holy Spirit, soul, ghost, to your own disposition. And then there is also that wonderful thing that is the distillate. I often say, people tell me who are drinkers that water is a good drink taken in the right spirit. So, however you like to take that. So you can see that this is where I think a lot of these perceptions of spirituality come into conflict, if you like. So from what I'm looking, there are two different categories, two major categories. One is related to religious beliefs, and the other is about that intangible, immaterial space, this sentient part of a person. For this, I am going to focus more on point number 2. But I would also like to say here that point number 1 is where a lot of the visibility for spirituality comes. And that also then sometimes makes other people stand back because they don't want to offend or, you know, confront or whatever it is. So this point number 2 is not often used, so it is quite invisible. But why this question? Why am I asking, is sustainability the essence, is spirituality the essence of sustainability? So what I'm thinking here is sustainability is such a critical issue that do we dare leave any stone unturned? If it is, and we haven't gone into it, we miss out. So I think this is far too critical to actually leave out. At these seminars, we hear so many people saying, giving the science, giving all these things, and yet, do you get compelling? You know, does science compel us into action? Or is it something else that compels us into action with sustainability? So that, for me, is also partly why I think this is so important. Schumacher, those of you, many of you, I'm sure, would have read his Small is Beautiful. I love his guide for the perplexed. He talks about divergent and convergent problems. And with divergent problems, he talks about different ways to reach a solution, and the solutions don't necessarily have to meet. You've got, let's say, if you are looking at education, you can be quite a disciplinarian with it and have that quite rigid approach, or you could use a completely creative approach. It's not to say one is right or one is wrong, and they can end up in completely different places. So that's divergent problems. And then you've got your convergent problem, which is your 2 and 2 equals 4, right? So you do get one solution to that problem. There's no changing it. What Schumacher says is that divergent problems can only be transcended, if you like, by higher levels of self-awareness. And what does he refer to when he says higher levels of self-awareness? This is Schumacher talking. This is the world-renowned economist saying you need love, empathy, compassion. And he says these faculties are needing a higher level of thinking, if you like, than those for the implementation of policy. So it's the underpinning, it's the essence of it that he's talking about. And he goes on to say that it's not just to be aware of this, but it's got to be embedded permanently. It's got to guide your whole decision-making. So that's Schumacher. And then we've got David Orr, environmentalist and pretty well-known author as well. He's environmental and politics is his special area. He's a professor in that area. And he talks about us needing almost like a spiritual renewal to be able to transition to sustainability. He talks about, in fact, 4 areas that are needed for this transition, or 4 areas, 4 challenges, he says, that if we don't make, we will not get to transit to sustainability. One of these areas is a condition he calls spiritual emptiness. The others he talks about, one is citizenship and governance, needing different approaches in that. He talks about education, saying we need not just the standards, but we need to actually learn ways in which to engage with all these things. And he also talks about needing to find new models, new, what does he say? He talks about relating to biophysical wealth. So we can't just talk about wealth without relating it to biophysical wealth. Then we've got this other area, which is spiritual intelligence. The work of Gardner, I think he talks more about 7 different types of intelligences, if you like, including music and spatial and sports and things like that. But Zohar and Marshall have brought it down to the 3. So the 3 intelligences, in fact, relate to IQ, which is about our logic, which is about how we piece things together within given frameworks, very much the computer-like process. Then it is about EQ, the second one, EQ, which Zohar and Marshall have referred to as almost the emotion, the intelligence that's high in animals, where you see how to respond to something. You know how to react when you see different things. And it has to be within a known area. If it goes outside that known area, your brain has to start to grow those networks to understand it again. So I'm learning about this. This whole area is so interesting. Then they talk about spiritual intelligence as the missing link. If you don't have the spiritual intelligence underpinning the IQ and the EQ, you don't have the moving forward. Because without the SQ, you can't ask why. You can't have the reasoning behind it, and you can't be creative enough to make something new from it. So SQ is seen as our moral sense. It is the meaning-giving center. So SQ is argued as, in fact, critical. It is wisdom from beyond the ego or conscious mind. It is the intelligence with which we not only recognize existing values, but we create and discover new ones. Isn't that what sustainability, what we need to actually to move into sustainability? There we go, about creativity. I've done that, haven't I? Okay. But so it's asking the question why. And it comes back to all the actions that we do in our lives. Do we just do the actions because it's been done forever and a day? Or do we ask why we do what we do? I was just reading, in fact, Viktor Frankl. In the 1950s, he was looking at an area. He didn't call it spirituality. He called it existentialism. And he was saying that back in the 1950s, when he looked at his students in Europe, there was about 25% of his students who actually had a superficial approach to their studies, and there was no depth of meaning there. And he found that that was higher in America. It went up to about 50–60%. So it's very interesting, this whole sense of meaning. You introduced this with care. Meaning. So here we are we've got so much in our world now that is with IQ focus. And yet is that what is causing this spiritual desert? Does it come from our reliance on IQ? We've reasoned ourselves away from nature and our fellow creatures. We've reasoned ourselves beyond religion. We've taken all the leap forwards. We've left traditional culture behind. Yes, IQ has so much value, but have we found a way to actually link it all up, to understand why we actually do what we do? I couldn't help myself but put this slide in. This is from a card I received in the mid-90s, because I was always carrying on about this, and one of my friends found this card, and it just says it so plainly, this Lunig, beautiful way of saying it. How strange. It's as if everybody knows precisely why we do it, and the reason is too obvious to mention. I mean, how often do we feel like that? You know, we don't dare ask because. Do we do it because everybody else does it, because we are afraid of not doing it? And it's that the drawings, you can see, we just carry on with our lives, status quo, as usual, you know, and we're too busy. We are absolutely too busy to think of anything else. Okay, so here comes to part of the research then. My research is on the role of spirituality in environmental sustainability in the Western Australian context. And I'm asking, as part of that, how do Western Australians engage in spirituality, if they do at all? And how do they define spirituality and see its connection with our lives? Now, I have to say here, I am only at the point of starting to decipher this great lot of rich information that I've got. So there's a lot more work to be done. But as part of the methodology, I have interviewed 30 people, and workshops, different workshops have been attended by 75 different participants. So I've got quite a lovely wide range of opinions coming through. And I have used various methodologies, if you like, one of which is phenomenography. So not phenomenology, which is a study of the phenomenon of spirituality, but phenomenography, which is the study of the experience itself, how people are experiencing the phenomenon. So that is the phenomenon of spirituality. And this is the matrix that I have developed to use as part of the research. I'll just show you how it works, if you like, by using this corporate system column. So in the corporate system, how do people communicate in the corporate system, and you'd use written words, wouldn't you? You develop policy, you develop curriculum, that contract, has it been signed, it needs to be in writing. So it's a written word. The skills required in the corporate system, you need to have writing and speaking skills, but in the third person. You can't get too emotionally involved. It's a different thinking. And there you go, the process is one of detachment. And what is the foundation of this corporate system? The foundation meaning something, if you took it away, the whole system would collapse. So here we've got, I've put down management and governance as the foundation, because if you take away management and governance, does a corporate system exist? Not really, it disappears. And then essential conditions. You've got to have facts and figures to feed up to the management and governance. And we spend billions on feasibility studies, on reports, on all sorts of things, right? Intended outcome, I've put money there and got into lots of trouble for putting money there. There are people that have gone, but that's not true. Corporate systems stand for a lot more than that. That's fine, and I probably have to rethink that. But let me put my case to you. I've put money there because money is flat and lifeless, right? You give it value. And the values, I would argue, come from the other parts of your life. All of these are lenses into the same one life that is you, right? So for me, corporate systems are also flat and lifeless. You give life to them. And I think we've got to be quite clear what is the system and then what is the values, what we give to it. So using this, you can imagine now how I've approached spirituality. My research has included nature and spirituality, but for the purpose of today, I'm only referring to spirituality itself. So how do you communicate in spirituality? These words are simply just their starting points. People can agree or disagree with it. What skills do you need to engage in this dimension that we call spiritual? And so on, right? So now I've got some of the responses from that. And with this, here's how I'm putting it to you today. On this side, you will see quotes or trends put together from the personal communications that I've had with all those people. And on the right-hand side, I've actually put in the comparisons with sustainability quotes from authors, etc. So let's see how we track with this. And by the way, with this on the left-hand side, you can, in fact, superimpose the word sustainability with the word spirituality quite easily. Do that yourself as we progress, and you will see how it actually sits. So people are saying you have to value spirituality. And you value it if it means something to you. You show that you value it through the quality and intent of your interaction with it. Now imagine superimposing that with the word sustainability. It gives it that depth, it gives it that meaning. And here we've got a quote from Porritt, and he's saying he used to consider environmentalism a defense of values. He now considers environmentalism a defense of meaning. The challenge of change. And you look at spirituality here, so many people are saying it's about letting go. It's a letting go of ego. Being open to new experiences, emptying out preconceived ideas. How relevant is that to sustainability? Again, I put that question to you. And here we've got, from times before, 92, Suzuki, Knudsen, meaningful change will require radical different ways of thinking. We know that that has to happen, but it's the how, isn't it? It's a cry for help. There were many who say their spirituality was like a cry for help, for connection, to know more, to be loved. And that same cry for help you can see in this from David Abram in his latest book, Becoming Animal. He talks about there's too many forests felled, and wetlands filled, and car bombs bursting bodies, searing the land and splattering it with blood, and addled and anesthetized numbness is spreading rapidly throughout the species. Isn't that a cry for help, just as the other is a cry for help? So we're looking at these intangible, the places which touch us deeply. It's about living, not just existing. So the people who've talked about their experiences of spirituality find it brings them to life. Living happens when spirituality is enabled. And then here you see, in Cormac Cullinan, he talks about, he says, I am pleading for the recognition that what we call governance needs soul. Not soul in the sense of an immortal soul, although there are parallels. Thought that was beautifully clever. This one, it's about the natural phenomenon, and we need to make time to enjoy the moments. How do we know what these moments of sublime perfection are unless we continually take time to know it ourselves, to go out there, to be in it? How can you reproduce the perfect scenario unless you are there living it a lot of the time? Same thing happens with the sustainable. There's so much around you when you watch a beautiful sunset, when you go into a forest and experience the magic. It's like perfection. So you've got to know it to actually bring it into your lives. Here's some of the how that came up from people. Being able to hear the silence. Can you imagine running lessons on doing that? Right? How do we bring that knowledge to people? Eliminating the babble of words. Stopping the constant analysis. I find that hard myself too. Sometimes you're right in the middle of it and you just can't break out of it. You've got to go and disappear somewhere before you can stop that constant, what we're so used to doing every day. The stillness, the awe, embarking on meditative journeys. Hope has come up very, very strongly in the responses. And hope has been said to be, yes, it's a spiritual word. Hope is not a scientific word. It's a spiritual word. And here we have Newman and I think it's Isabel Jennings. Hope emerges out of good governance, but it is also the quality that gives rise to good governance. So there you go. It's the embeddedness. It's all that is needed there. Talking about life and death as well has come up quite a bit in talking about spirituality. People die, but their spirits live on in the habits they foster, their personality, their spirit that is remembered, and the contributions that they've made in their life. And this, I love this one from Thomas Berry. Don't know if any of you have read his great works. He talks about his whole life journey as having been impacted by seeing one spectacular natural scene where the perfection came to him. He talks of looking across a creek and seeing a meadow, and the sunlight and everything else was just perfect. And he says his whole life work has been around remembering that. It's not there now, but it's in his mind. Whatever preserves and enhances this meadow is good. Whatever opposes or negates it is not good. So you can see through the life of favorite places and through the life of people, it can embody spirit, even though those places have come and gone or those people have come and gone. Some conclusions for now. Going back to Schumacher, talking about a higher level of consciousness, I would link that into spirituality or existentialism. Is that the word? Am I saying it right? Whatever you want to call it. Some people don't like the word spirituality, but whatever you call it, that one, I think, fits quite well. Then we required to develop that spiritual intelligence as well, a deeper sense of meaning. And hopefully, with the deeper sense of meaning, will come the meaning behind sustainability. So through spirituality, we can explore why we do what we do, and who we are, and where we are going. We need to learn to let go of preconceived ideas. That is so relevant for sustainability. How do we do that? That's so critical. And we have to be open to radical different ways of thinking. And we have to embrace hope. Part of how we go forward has been the recommendations of we need to teach philosophy. We need to teach ethics and other areas that encourage the higher thinking so that we can transcend the divergent problems. And divergent problems are always very full of tension. You know, we've got to find ways to overcome that, find some common ground, find some ways to do that. And the other thing is we can't take spirituality for granted and assume that people know. It has to be constantly repeated, and I hope you don't mind, Roseanne, I'm going to pick on you. Roseanne is the founder of Perth City Farm, and she constantly in her life work would always say, what are your key motto words? Your values? Respect, non-judgment, and compassion. She brings in, I didn't think I ever went through a day engaged with you in City Farm that those words didn't come forward. As she's working with young people, as she's working with stakeholders, bureaucrats, whatever, she used to enforce those. And the thing is, we can't assume it, we can't take it for granted and assume that it will happen. It's just like in nature, if you don't identify things, if you don't give them names, they don't exist. So we've got to call things by names, if you like. And then we need to somehow renew the concept of spirituality. It is a word that has so much baggage, or it has been given so much baggage. So how do we explore that? So spirituality can't just be two-dimensional. It is not black and white, not just black and white. Black is not black, is it? Nothingness is not nothingness. I love, you know, listening to Lawrence Krauss and people like that, your particle physicists and all the new discoveries in those areas are mind-blowing. So nothing in blackness is not blackness. And white, I remember doing a science experiment when I was little, where we drew on a circle all the different colors of the rainbow. Then we made it like a top. Did anybody ever do that? Yeah? And it turns white. So black and white is not what it is. In fact, it is all the colors of the rainbow. It's all the colors in our world needs to come alive through spirituality. And I would suggest that if we just rely on the two-dimensional world, we are simply going from within it, and we can't change from within. Who was the person who made that famous quote? I don't recall, but some great philosopher or scientist. Einstein, thank you. The greatest, I forgot. Yes, thank you for that. So, you know, we can't make change from within. So we have to look at different things. We have to look at the full gambit. And that is, I just wanted to end before I actually end and say that the word spirit, the origin of the word spirit, comes with the word blow, wind, inspiration. There are some languages today which still use those words, still mean this. I think in your language, Dora, is that right?
Yeah.
How do you say it?
It's dur, but it's related to blowing. Yes.
Okay, so all those three are incorporated with it. I just am fascinated with that. So that whole energy of life, of wind, of spirit, the whole thing, inspiration is my favorite word, because spirit is slap bang in the middle of it. And there we have it. Thank you very much.